That's America's biggest problem, debt on all levels, federal, state, local, corporate, and personal. And so when people say to me, what should I do in all that? I say, listen, be one of those people either out of debt or working your way out of debt and live a lifestyle of less is more. Sometimes simplicity may be the best answer to big problems.
Hey everyone, welcome back to StockPulse. And today I have got Peter Grandich with me. Welcome, Peter.
Good to be back with you.
So I'm so excited. You and I got to meet before, maybe about a few months ago. We did a recording and we had a little bit of an update as to the markets. And for you guys that don't know me, I'm Patrick Hakim, and I am here with StockPulse talking about what's happening inside the markets today. And what I wanted to ask Peter on today was, I saw a tweet that he did, and it was about retirement and about retirement age people and where we're going with this whole idea of a nuclear family. And I know that as I've been following you, our values align so much that I just find myself resonating with a lot of the stuff you've been posting. And as a young man, young-ish man, I guess, I don't know. I have a newborn on the way, so I feel kind of young. But I'm looking at this going, how many people are actually still having the kids in their home and that's still part of their retirement plan? And they didn't plan for that, 20 years ago. What are we looking at here in today's markets, especially when it comes down to the truth about retirement and, as you say, what they're not telling you?
So next to the ultimate crisis, the debt crisis, which towers over the retirement crisis, even though the retirement crisis is serious enough on its own, is we have about 2/3 of Americans now working paycheck to paycheck, Patrick. So let's take a step back. First of all, there's nothing spiritually about retirement. It's not a biblical process. There was no such thing as retirement. In fact, in real biblical times, people worked till they dropped. I mean, that was basically it.
Yeah, if you do not work, you shall not eat.
But in the late 1880s, around 1880s, there was a German politician who came up with a novel idea that in order to get elected, he was running for something. He was going to make the government put money aside for people to retire, and he picked an age that almost no one was going to live to anyway, so he didn't expect to spend a lot of money on it. And that was really the informal kickoff of a retirement phase. I don't think you have to be biblically led to think that we need to kill ourselves for 75 or 80% of our life, so somehow the last 20% is in some sort of special comfort. But nevertheless, the retirement industry is a huge industry within the financial service industry. People spend a lot of time and money working towards it. And so we're going to have 2/3 of Americans not even get to it, or get to it what they thought it would be, some type of recreational, carefree lifestyle for the remaining part of your life. And that is a serious issue, because what we're realizing now is, first of all, we're living much longer than we lived 100 years ago. So the family that you talked about, that nucleus, was an interesting point that you brought up. 50 years ago, when I was a young man, we lived in smaller dwellings. We also lived in multi-type dwellings, and there was a great uncle or great grandpa or grandma living with us. There was 3 generations within a dwelling or a shared dwelling.
Yeah.
And so there was no such thing as assisted living. I mean, there were a couple nursing homes if somebody was really, really ill, but families took care of the elders. But now, because we're living to a much longer age, and with that comes diseases and struggles that didn't happen because we weren't living as long before, we've gone off into also concerns about, will we be physically and mentally able to take care of ourselves in an older age? In fact, in polls, Patrick, across the board, people that are seniors, people that are 55 and over, and especially 65 and over, are more fearful of running out of money than they are dying. And that tells you what that must feel like, that if something more than death concerns you. Yeah. And so it's a crisis that's not about to go away. It has a lot of legs. We're going to have problems with housing for seniors. We're going to have people who are going to be medically struggling and need help, all at a time when we're indebted up to our ears. So it is a crisis. You wouldn't know it listening to the financial service ads for about retirement, but nevertheless, a lot of people, and part of it is, and people say, well, how do we get here? Well, part of the reason we got here is because Americans have been living above their pay grade, meaning they've taken from their future by not saving for retirement in a manner that they should, and or getting into debt so they can live a lifestyle higher than they really should be. And that's another cause for the retirement crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I really resonate with that. And one of the things I'd even suggest is when I think about this, to me, I don't feel like what we're doing is the right thing. As I've grown up, I grew up with grandparents who lived with me, first generation Egyptian, born and raised here in LA. And the way that I saw things work was my grandparents were around, my parents were around. We had extended family that we met with regularly. It was this micro community, and it was beautiful and it worked, and we were there for each other. And what I see happening now, maybe it's due to social media, maybe it's due to some of the, propaganda that's being perpetrated out there. But what I really see happening is just this breakdown of family. And I feel like it is something that I am very aware of. And I don't want to leave this legacy for my kids where I've outspent. And I guess what I want to ask for is, from a younger man's perspective, I aspire for more of micro community living. And I feel like that's something that most people have gotten away from, is they want to get out to their own place and go venture off. But what we're really missing, and what I know I value more than, even opportunity to speak with people like you, is just the idea that I get to be home with my wife and my kids, and we're safe and we're enjoying meals together, and I've got family. How do we get back to something like that? Where's the hope for the future? How can we fix some of the problems that we've made, or at least, as we understand what's happening in our financial system, the collapse of the dollar, the issues that we're having with energy that we see happening globally, the collapse of our values and morals as a society of America, like, what can we do differently to prepare our kids for what we see coming down the line?
So the values and morals are the key issue, because that's what's changed radically. And that sense of family that you spoke about was across all ethnicities. It doesn't matter the color of your skin or what religion you were. That's how families stayed. They were always, like I said, there was a great uncle and or a great grandma or grandpa in the household. It just was common. Uh, Now, unfortunately, the only way those things are happening for people is being forced upon them. Either the younger are having to come back in and move back in with the parents at an older age because they're struggling to stay, or actually now seniors are actually forming communal centers where people who are not related are living together at an old age because that's the only way they could stay functioning and all. It's a sad part. I half joke all the time. In my late 60s now, I want to meet the person that told me years ago, wait for my golden years. It's a changed life once in your golden years. Things that you grew accustomed easily to do when you were younger don't happen the way that it does, and that's another negative that's making it difficult for seniors. But there's so many other things, but you hit on something that half of America doesn't seem to care about anymore. But we're not spiritually led the way we were a generation or two ago. Whether that's right or wrong, I'm not here to argue that. But I can tell you, spirituality, faith, religion doesn't have the impact on how we think we should be living like it did for our parents and our grandparents. And that secularism that has taken hold has leaked out to also socialism. And therefore, the unity of family isn't as important. Family is where we're all one big group. And unfortunately, it works on paper, communism, socialism, but it's yet to succeed anywhere for any real length of time. And that's unfortunately part of the many, many issues that face Americans right now. They're not the biggest issues, but they are important.
Yeah, I think you could see that right now, especially as we're just looking at what's happening in China. The effects of communism are quite clear. The effects of social control, the one-child policy, especially as you look at it when Nobody Special Jack talks about it, it really adds some perspective. And I know that for you, global context is really important. So maybe we take a step back and just zoom out a little bit and say, taking into perspective what's happening right now within the BRICS nations, what's happening right now in the Middle East, and what's happening with Israel, and how they're changing the ports and how they're doing the new, what they call the yellow bricks road, right? What are we talking about here when we start talking about the future for our children and how they should be saving? When you start seeing these global shifts to one world currencies or more of a standard, even considering things like Bitcoin that haven't really been part of a discussion before the last 10 years, how do you see that playing into saving for your family's future wealth? Are you a real estate heavy guy? Are you like a let's buy gold, get silver for your grandkids, stock up Bitcoin like me? What do you stand with over here as a solution for preparing for financial policy as we move forward the next 20 years?
Well, what's right for me, I've never been a cookie cutter person. So what's right for me may not be right for someone else that's listening to this. But I can tell you, you did talk about an extremely important subject, and that's what's happening with the BRIC nations. People still, especially in what I coined the "Don't Worry, Be Happy" crowd that makes up most of the financial service industry, have not grasped how significant of a movement this is and what impact it's going to have. It may not become everything and anything in this soon to be meeting that they're going to have. But I can tell you that I've stated, as you know, because you say you follow my tweets, over the next 1 to 3 years, I believe what is happening in the BRIC movement will rival what industrial revolution did for world trade is going to happen for us. And America is going to be outside looking in. Mm-hmm. The bottom line to the BRIC movement is we're in, you're out, meaning to America. And we have not begun to take that into account. We haven't looked at how that's going to hit corporations. How are we going to fund our ever increasing deficits and all, especially when people are choosing to move away from the dollar and not being forced to own it. It's a whole host of reasons that, again, I don't think as we speak today, people are paying any real mind to it in the regular and so-called investment community or in the mainstream financial media or the general media. But I think a year from now, there'll be a lot of conversation about it. And why I feel this way and what really propelled me is not the original groups and thoughts, but the fact that Saudi Arabia and the Middle East as a whole, who really felt really peed-o'd after Biden came out and tried to bully them into a position that they weren't prepared for and quite frankly didn't need to take because of the energy issue that was happening here, really opened the door for our so-called competitors, if you want to call them enemies, particularly China, to step into the Middle East in a big way. I mean, things that have happened in the Middle East since that visit by Biden have been tremendous. Iran and Saudi Arabia being led to peacemaking by China. I mean, these are things if somebody would have wrote 10 years ago and said, listen, this is going to happen 10 years from now, people say you're crazy. Saudi
and the
Arabia.
Petrodollar is dead, right? Everything that
Saudi
Kissinger
Arabia,
dead. They no longer care about the dollar. What we used to do, what we used to offer them was our military protection in exchange for them using the dollar to do oil transactions. Now the dollar is no longer a settlement for oil transactions. They don't care about us anymore. And you see China starting to dump the US dollars as well. So, man, this is really some stuff where you're going, if you're paying attention, you're seeing the shift of power in the dollar. That really is what is money. Money is the trust of the consumer to be able to exchange it for something of value over time, that it's not going to be volatile. And I don't think that they're going to be seeing that with the dollar for very much longer. While China dumping our dollars may not really impact the DXY because they're not a factor of the DXY, we don't see these radical changes, but there will be downstream impacts. And I guess I'd like to ask a question more simply stated like this. When you have a consideration for your children's future and you want your child to be able to buy a house, you consider the average value of a house, and let's say, back in 2012, the average value of a home was roughly $200,000, $225,000. And that meant that it used to take you a whole lot of Bitcoin to buy that, right? Because at that time, Bitcoin wasn't worth very much. Today, you look at the value of a new house, and the price of a new house is roughly about $450,000. And in terms of Bitcoin, it's roughly about 20 Bitcoin. As I look forward into the future, understanding that Bitcoin is a very scarce supply, that we know it's limited supply, it's only going to be 21 million. Would you favor someone understanding the concept of gold and Bitcoin and using that as a hedge of inflation, or would you suggest a different means? Because I feel like right now people are missing an opportunity, and I don't know what the issue is with them understanding the purchasing power of Bitcoin will go up every 4 years. It hasn't failed for the last 12 years. We've seen that Bitcoin has continued to increase in purchasing power. If it takes 20 Bitcoin today and I tell you it costs maybe 15 Bitcoin in a couple of months, why would you not stack up Bitcoin today? Because we see banks doing that. We see them hoarding Bitcoin. We see them holding gold. We see them buying Bitcoin and gold more than ever before. So I guess my question is, looking forward to the future, should we be considering assets like Bitcoin for kids and for people looking forward for 20 years, and how they might consider a future in savings for their family with an asset class that has no ability to stop with government oversight? There is no counterparty risk. Like gold, there's no ability to stop transacting the value.
So after 40 years, I learned that markets only exist because there's a person that believes it's worth selling, and there's a person worth thinks that it's worth buying. And without that, nothing would transact. I believe you and I are on opposite spectrums when it comes to Bitcoin. And I respect your view for it. I'm not here to get into a discussion on its values and all. What I sooner respond to is for myself and what I believe it is. For me, it would not be something that I would seek. That doesn't mean that the overall technology, which is really blockchain technology, won't be incorporated into the way the world does business in the future. And where we'll probably find agreement is that something that digitalizes, particularly digitalizing gold, and if a gold standard of some sort or some backing is brought in, either alternatively among just some countries that decide to trade, or in a currency that looks to replace or compete with the dollar as a world reserve currency, blockchain technology using digital gold is something that I would be a better on that can happen.
Wow, that's a great comment. I love that. Joe Brown, I'm going to send this to you because Joe Brown says, and I'm going to quote it's something like this, that he doesn't see the value in adding Bitcoin or a digital currency and mixing it with the utility of gold. He doesn't think that there's a lot of value there. But again, I have seen the other side of the conversation where I say, no, I think a lot of these people would love to have a digital way to transact the value of their gold and silver because it reduces the premiums and it's quicker. So there's a lot of benefits, and I see the upside. You hit on a point that I still haven't made up my mind yet. I could see the value of Bitcoin definitively, but what I couldn't see is there value in the silver and precious metals community, the gold community, in these digital backed precious metal tokens? And what I'm hearing from you is, yeah, it kind of piques my interest a lot, and the solution of blockchain is cool.
Patrick, there was a lot of money lost, as much as people that were early like you and were smart enough to see it. But a lot of money was lost outside of Bitcoin, obviously, because it's still around, it's still trading, it still has liquidity, things of that nature. But there were a lot of things that just were the hypes of a lifetime, in my view. I mean, people literally saying our coin is just BS, and people put a bid on it and traded it up. That had to be shaken out, and there's still probably some to go. Okay, somewhere between your view and my view is where the market will probably be 5 or 10 years from now. So no one is absolutely certain yet in this. I do know this much, where I think we're both on agreement. The dollar is done. It's only a question of time. Okay. One of the things that's not thought about, and it was presented to me by a very bright man who was a managing director of a household worldwide financial group conglomerate. And I did not think of this. This is not my original thought, but it made a lot of sense to me after he shared it with me, and I'm going to share with you. One of the many reasons for China to want to see the dollar ended or seriously wounded as a world reserve currency is, without it as a world reserve currency, we will not be able to borrow in the way that we borrow now. We basically have people forced to buy our debt because we were the world reserve currency. Once an alternative is presented to them and the dollar isn't the everything that some still think it is, we will have an extremely difficult time to continue financing deficits. And what we won't be able to do is add another 3 to 5 trillion in debt to finance some world war with China with. And so his thinking is, part of China's thinking is that if they can get that to happen, they may never need to fire a weapon in order to defeat us from being the number one, world power by that incurring not ability to incur debt to a level that we're at. Patrick, one thing I hope your listeners, no matter what their age is to take heed to. The Congressional Budget Office, known as the CBO, is the last of the bastion of bipartisanship in government. The rest is everybody hates each other. They won't even go in a room together with each other right now. And they came out earlier this year and said that in less than 10 years, our deficit's going to be, our budget is going to be, debt is going to be $50 trillion. $50 trillion. It's 33 trillion now. At 5% interest rate, which we're, as you and I are speaking, we're getting very close to it again. We're going to have a $2.5 trillion interest expense. The government's best year ever last year was a little over $5 trillion. And that doesn't count all the money that's owed for Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which people expect to be another 50 to 100 trillion. We are not going to be able to operate. It's just not going to. We're either going to implode, we're going to default, or we're going to have to inflate so high to remove a lot of that debt. So anybody that's planning past the next year or two really better take that heed on that, because there's nothing on the horizon that's stopping this snowball of indebtedness. In fact, we now saw that after our most recent titty-tatty that they have in Washington about a debt ceiling. Why they have a debt ceiling to this day, I don't know. They've gone past it 73 times already. But within just 3 months, they've added another almost $1 trillion to that debt.
It's almost like the word trillion doesn't mean anything anymore.
It didn't. When I entered the business 40 years ago, we were the world's largest credited nation. It's inconceivable that if we could have had a discussion then and somebody said, Pete, in your lifetime, while you're still a financial advisor, there'll be 30-something trillion in debt. I said, impossible. How can it be? We don't need that. There's no reason for that. Well, here we are. And so I still stay, and going back to the spiritual argument to it, and I do my best to keep my secular business separate from my spiritual life, but there are times when it's unavoidable. And whether you look at scripture as just an historical book that some people got together and write, or the word of God, or somewhere in between, it doesn't have one positive thing to say about debt. In fact, its biggest financial warning is about the problems that are going to be associated with debt. And that's America's biggest problem, debt. On all levels, federal, state, local, corporate, and personal. And so when people say to me, what should I do in all that? I say, listen, be one of those people either out of debt or working your way out of debt, and live a lifestyle of less is more. We didn't have
you heard that. That's very simple.
Patrick, one last thing. We didn't have public storage when I was a kid. We had smaller dwellings. People didn't have 4,000 square foot homes on average, and they weren't paying people down the main road to store the extra stuff there that they can't keep in the 4,000 square foot home. We have too much stuff. Sometimes simplicity may be the best answer to big problems, and that would be somehow if America started to live a less is more lifestyle. But it's not. It's going in the opposite direction.
That's why I love your tweets, because that sounds like something you would put right out in a tweet. Like the less is more lifestyle is something that we need to start becoming happier with, and realizing that we have comfort and blessing, and knowing that we have just simplicity, that you don't have this extra burden as we see in debt. So guys, Peter, thank you so much for coming. If you guys love this kind of content, please like, share, subscribe. We're going to hopefully see you guys at the StockPulse Symposium, guys, September 29th to August 1st or October 1st. We'd love to see you guys out there. Link is in the description below. You'll be able to get your tickets there. And Peter, I just really appreciate you taking time to come on the show, and definitely you are welcome back anytime. I love your perspective here. You guys heard it straight from Pete. He never would have seen this coming, but even as he sits here today, I find myself unable to disagree with him that getting rid of debt, really making sure that it's not a slave, that you're not a slave to your debt, is one way to ensure that you have financial freedom moving forward, and that no matter what's going on in the future, that your kids don't have to worry about debt for their home, for their cars. Teach them to live a lifestyle that's different. I know that's what I'm doing with my family, and I look forward to you guys continue to keep stacking sats. Or if you're more like Peter, keep stacking gold and maybe get ready to stack some digital gold sats, right? So until next time, guys, we'll talk to you soon. Thanks again, Peter.